Well, welcome everybody, and hi, I'm Steve Tucker, the producer of the event today, and I wanted to share a few housekeeping items. As you know, we're using Zoom Webinars platform, so only the host and experts will be visible on video. If you would like to make a comment or ask a question, you can type it in the chat box below. If you have a chance, locate it before the event starts so you're ready to ask any questions. We will be moderating it and we will be handing off questions back to our guests today. This session is being recorded and will be available to watch and share later this week. And now I have the pleasure of introducing you to the Aspen Brain Institute's founder and president, Glenda Greenwald.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. Glad to almost see all of you. Of course, I can't see everybody, but welcome to everybody all over the US. About 200 or 300 people have signed up to listen to our wonderful expert speaker, Dr. Nir Barzilai. And I want to tell you some things beforehand. This is our first Zoom Aspen Brain Institute Expert Speaker Series. And we're offering this free Zoom series and hoping that the series will be the foundation of building a global community that's focused on brain health. That's our goal. We'd like to first thank Lugano Diamonds and Alpine Bank for their sponsorship, and thanks to our many friends at a group called Aspen Brain Futures. They're joining us today, and also to our friends at the American Federation for the Research on Aging. Welcome all. You'll hear more about each of these groups at the end of our session. First, I want to tell you a little bit about Aspen Brain Institute and then get quickly to our exciting speaker, Dr. Nir Barzilai. At the Aspen Brain Institute, we are dedicating our lives and our work to making sure that this is the last generation of 60 to 95-year-olds who are decimated by Alzheimer's, of which there are no cures. At the Aspen Institute, we also believe that this is one of the greatest challenges, global challenges of our time. And we want to do work to prevent this. And for that reason, we are going to produce this expert speaker series. And now in the time of COVID, when we can all learn this more than at any other time, we are producing this free Zoom speaker expert series. And again, we have several hundred people from around the US who have registered to listen to us. And just want to remind everybody that the purpose of the series is to increase brain health literacy and to share the access to the top minds and the top evidence-based information on brain health. So welcome all. I'm now pleased to introduce our first expert speaker. An expert he is, Dr. Nir Barzilai. Originally from Israel, Nir we're very glad that he met his wife in the US and decided to stay here. He is now the founding director of the Institute for Aging Research at the Albert Einstein School of Medicine in New York. Nir Barzilai is a pioneer in the science of longevity, and he's the first scientist to discover a human longevity gene. Through his longevity gene project, he is now looking at 750 centenarian families and trying to discover more unique longevity genes. Dr. Barzilai will be speaking in one moment about the new science of longevity, and he may be asking some provocative questions, such as, is aging optional? Is aging a disease? And even, is aging preventable? I can't wait to hear him. Dr. Barzilai, take it away.
Thank you, Glenda, for this very nice introduction. Thank you for doing these events. Uh, Thank you for me zooming from sea level to Aspen and having no shortness of breath. And it's really important for me because I'm a COVID-19 survivor, although I have to tell you it was really mild. Um, just remember, 99.5% are going to survive this infection. And, you know, I think it's really exciting time. I think that history and hope rhyme, and I'm very positive of what can happen now to science and to the world. And it's nice to share those thoughts with you. I really hope that you will stay positive in the outlook and stay negative as far as COVID-19. Which brings me to the first slide because I have to make this connection. Aging is something that we can do something about. Unlike what our mothers and everybody told us, aging is a very flexible thing. We can do a lot. And we were caught here, not on the transfer between hope to promise, but between promise and realizing it. Now, the hope is that we can do something about aging. But look what aging is doing to us. I have here a slide that shows death according to age from China, from Italy, from the United States, from the EU. And in different ways, they all make the same point. Your chances of dying when you're over the age of 80 is about 180 times more than if you're 20 years old. Aging is the major risk factor for death here. And you can say, no, it's not exactly aging, it's multimorbidity. Well, multimorbidity for me, if you have a lot of multimorbidities, you're aging rapidly. And if you have less, you're not aging as rapidly because aging drives those diseases. So that's where we were caught at. And the question is, there something we can do about it? And I'm not forgetting that this is about the brain. So I'll make this connection too. But just as much as I don't care which diseases really, I don't care for which diseases just because aging is the major risk factor for all those diseases. And for me, I'm looking at aging as a target for the brain, just as much as I'm looking for the biology of aging as a target for any other disease or organs. So is anything hopeful about aging that is relevant to COVID-19? Well, first of all, is the fact that aging has a biology and that this biology can be targeted. The fact that aging has biology shouldn't, you know, we all know that. We know our grandparents, right? And in some time, we actually knew that we're going to look like our grandparents. Although as children, we think they're just different species. But the realization that we can do something about it, that's called geroscience, is kind of new, but has produced all the preliminary evidence for that. Moreover, geroprotectors or gerotherapeutics are in human use and might be even very relevant for the COVID-19 one, as much as it is for preserving the brain as we age. So let me make this point. This shows you many age-related diseases, or the death from many age-related diseases by age. Okay, so let's take cardiovascular disease. Okay, the risk of death goes from 5 to 5,000. So aging is 1,000-fold risk for heart disease. Now you can say, no, cholesterol. No, cholesterol is a 3-fold risk for heart disease. Aging is the major risk for heart disease. And it's the same for cancer. And it's the same for Alzheimer here in orange. And I actually want to bring pneumonia, because pneumonia in the death certificate is if you have ARDS, if you have the pulmonary effects and you die from COVID-19, the cause of death will be in pneumonia. And it goes from 1,000 to 2,000. So aging is the major risk for death from pneumonia. And our point seeing that is that aging drives those diseases. So if we want to do something about it, it doesn't make sense to solve one disease. I mean, if you go to the hospital with a heart attack and you get stent or bypass, you're still going within the next 2 years to get any one of the other diseases because you did something to the heart. But the only way to delay all those diseases is to deal with the biology of aging and change that. We, by the way, have a study that I'll talk briefly also at the end that's called TAME, that is initiated by the American Federation of Aging Research that was mentioned before, and we're trying to flatten this curve to show that we can actually increase the healthy lifespan. So back to the geroscience. So what we did as geroscientists, we came with what we call the hallmarks of aging. And I'll make some points about those hallmarks, and in no way I'm going to talk about all of them. But to mention that there are hallmarks of aging and they're interconnected, and that's very important. We can fix one and it can affect also the other. The hallmarks are not necessarily the causes of aging, but each one of the hallmark can serve as a place to intervene. Biotechs are out there to choose a hallmark of aging and try and do something about it. So I want to start first with the two hallmarks, that one is the immune dysfunction and one is the inflammation, because both of them are really relevant to COVID-19. Because of the immune dysfunction, the elderly get sick. They're less immune to deal with the virus. And because of inflammation, they get typically within few days this inflammatory storm. A lot of inflammation are up there and they're starting to attack the lung, and they're the ones that, and that's what's causing the disease. So those things are part of the hallmarks of aging, and it's really important to target them. But remember, it's not only about targeting the immune response. We want the rest of the body to be resilient to this terrible sickness. You want the rest of the body to do in better shape. And so we can do both of it. And sometimes we can do it, both of it with one drug, as I will show you. We can target the immune response and we can target the rest of the body. So if we get sick, we're in a better shape. And both of those things can change the history of what COVID-19 is going to be for a selected population. I want to make a point about proteostasis because I want to connect it to the brain. And in proteostasis, there's one biological mechanism that's called autophagy that is really important. What is autophagy? Autophagy is the garbage disposals in our cells. We get a lot of junk and more of it as we age, and this junk start to clot our cells. And there's a way to clear it by this garbage disposal. And by genetic methods and by drugs, we can do a lot in this garbage disposal, including preventing Alzheimer's and preventing Parkinson, where we have this accumulation of garbage, of beta amyloid and all those things that you heard about that are coming into the brain. And interestingly, when we increase autophagy, I'm talking about scientists, when scientists have target autophagy, they get also better metabolic changes and better mitochondria and better immunity too. So those things are interconnected, and for me, it's not about specific disease, it's about mechanisms that are going to be relevant to any way that we age. Now, what we've done as a community that really shortcut our travel was to find, rather than to describe aging, which is really complex, is to look at models who lived longer, who had longevity. And by finding models that we had longevity, we not only learned about aging, not everything we should, but not only we learned about a lot of aging, but it gave us ideas of how to target aging better. And I would say that in a summary, I would say those two sentences: healthy lifespan. And it's very important for me to say health span. Health span is really what I'm looking at rather than longevity. But healthy lifespan has been extended in numerous animal models by numerous ways. And there are drugs that, and genetic manipulation and interaction with the environment that have done that. And some of those relevant drugs are actually in human use. They're not used for aging or for longevity, but they're in use. So I'll give you several examples. So the examples that I want to give are one in the environment and one in the drug. The environment one, and that we have been done for decades, and we can repeat those experiments and get the same results. We take animals, and half of them, we let them eat what they want, and half of them, we restrict their calories, typically by 40%. So they ate 60% of what their brothers do. They would live longer. This is from my own experiments, and this is in rats. And you can see that in rats, they start dying, and by 130 days, they're all dead. But the caloric restricted are hanging up healthy for longer. It looks like they all die in the same day. They actually don't die in the same day because we set the experiment more than 3 months apart. But they reach their maximal lifespan, and then they die. So there's a 40% effect on longevity. Why am I bringing it here now? Not expecting you to do caloric restriction, but there is really something interesting that I've pretty much realized after I've done these experiments. And what we've done with these experiments, we came in the morning and we gave the animals the food for the day, the caloric restricted animals. And they were hungry because they're getting less food. And they ate the food within 20 minutes, and then they were fasting for 23 hours. So it's not only that they are caloric restricted, they're fasting, because our caloric restriction, when we talked about how it can be implemented in humans, we said, you know, you just eat less breakfast, less lunch, less dinner, but that's not what happened. And that led to this idea that many are practicing, and I'm sure some of you are practicing, and this is the 16-8 diet, or there are many variations. You fast for 16 hours, you basically skip breakfast, you eat late lunch, and then at the 8-hour period, you eat whatever you want. And there's a lot of important improvement in health parameter, in weight, and it's nice to feel hungry too. And I've been doing that for 6 or 7 months, and I really enjoy it, and it's very easy. But this is something about caloric restriction and how you can adapt it without starving to your life. The second example is a combination of 2 drugs that actually are important for the coronavirus to think when it comes to the coronavirus. One is called rapamycin, and one is called metformin. And when you combine those drugs together and give it to animals, they live almost the longest. Those mice live longest than any other mice, except the ones who are calorically restricted, by the way. They live 24% longer. You see that those here are dying, and those here are living longer. So the point here is, those are just 2 examples, environment and drugs, to show that we can modulate aging, we can modulate health span, And in fact, we can modulate longevity itself. So when we started, and I started working on those models, I thought, you know, we should also go to humans, because what would be the model that's relevant to humans? And we started recruiting 100 years old. And the idea is that most people in the United States die before the age of 80. You know, more than 50% die before the age of 80. And so those 100 years old have died significantly later. Maybe we should figure out what's genetically unique about them or environmentally unique about them, and figure out if we can imitate it somehow. And the picture here are 4 kids that were born to 2 people in New York City between 1910 and 1920. And what's unique about them is all of them reached the age of 102. Okay? In fact, when this little sister died at 102, the rest were shocked. I met Helen. Helen lived to 110, 109, 107. When I met Helen, she was 100 years old, and she opened the door to me, and she was smoking. And I said, Helen, no one told you that you shouldn't smoke? And she said, look, the 4 doctors that told me to stop smoking, they all died. In fact, our centenarians, and we published a lot, they, as a group, they didn't do anything interesting as far as an environment. They were obese or overweight, over 50%, less than 50% exercised, even housework or walking. So, et cetera, et cetera. They had no really very good interaction with the environment, and still they got to be 100, which for us was kind of a suggestion that they have something else that protects them. We have 3,000 subjects in our studies. Out of them, 750 are centenarians. And really, to make the point here is they didn't, I'll show you what's the relation with age-related diseases, but what's important is not only they didn't die, they preserved cognitive function. And in fact, we have grants, 2 grants to look at Alzheimer from the perspective of our subjects, to find longevity genes that are relevant to the brain. And we are finding that, and I'll give you an example, but imagine that we have centenarians who are ApoE4 positive, which means they're very likely, the textbook will say they're demented at 70 and they're dead at 80. Well, they're 100 years old and they're not demented. So what is it that protects them against the effect of ApoE4? And we have some explanations for that. But if we look at what happens to centenarians, our first question was, are they getting sick when everybody gets sick and somehow they get sick to be 100? Or is their health span and lifespan, does it go together? And the answer is no, they're living healthier. We looked at 5 different diseases, and we saw that the control are getting them, after the age of 60, a lot of them are getting more diseases, and at age 80, only 10% are not sick. On the other hand, our centenarians get the diseases like 20, 30 years later, and at age 100, 30% of them don't have any diseases. In fact, those 30% die one day, okay? Not with any disease. And really, this is kind of the fascinating part. It's not only the health span that goes with the lifespan. They have what we call a contraction of morbidity, which means they get sick to a very short time at the end of their lives. And this is been validated even by the CDC. I don't have to tell you about CDC these days, but the CDC was looking at the medical cost in the last 2 years of life of somebody who dies at 100 versus somebody who dies at 70. And it's third the cost. So we have kind of a proof that those centenarians don't go to the doctors. In fact, they didn't go to the doctors when they were 60 or 70 years old. And this and other data led to, of compression of morbidity, we came up with this term longevity dividend. If we just are going to be healthier for a long period of time and then die in a contraction, then there's a huge save to the economy. And that's why it's important for us to spread the gospels here and tell people, you know, it's not only important for the individual, of course, to be healthy, but it's actually important for the state to be healthy. And I should say that, you know, my feeling is that when we come out of COVID-19, and we will win this war, I'm sure, one of the winners are going to be scientists, because see what's happening. It's not only that people are more happy with Fauci than with Trump, if you take the polls, but look how the Pope came up and said, no gathering in church. And the Ramadan is not celebrated in mosque. And the rabbis are saying, don't go to the synagogue. So if the scientists have influence on the religious people, then I think this is good. And so I think we're hopeful that this science we're not going to cut on science. I doubt that the NIH will have a decrease. And I think we can plug pretty fast and start figuring out some other things that are so important for us. Now, back to the brain, we did a whole exome sequencing for all our 3,000 subjects, pretty much. And we were asking for all the genetic differences between control and centenarians. And we established the 50 candidates that are significantly different, genes or mutations in genes that are totally different between centenarians and control. And here are a list of them on the left, sorry. And the ones who are in red have been already shown to be relevant to Alzheimer in an independent way. So some of the genes that have been, or pathways that have been relevant to Alzheimer, we're looking at them from the other side, from the people who didn't get Alzheimer. Those have protective mutation. And just to make an example, one of them is this ABCA1, that, by the way, has mutation in 36 centenarians versus 17 in control. So there are twice as much mutation in centenarians. So there's overrepresentation in people who are 100 years old. And this is actually in clinical trials by a biotech. So this is already out there, but it shows that we are on the right angle here. And we're doing a lot to discover and understand all those. And those are in white. Some of them are going to be very relevant for Alzheimer's too. Some of them may not be, but we're discovering those new genes from people. We didn't start in animals and say, maybe that's what happens. We started in people, and we're asking, how are they resilient to Alzheimer? Maybe by having those mutations. If they have those mutations, we can develop a drug that will target those genes and make them act like they had the mutation. So I don't want you to think, oh, too bad if I'm not 100 years old, I don't have that. The whole idea of the 100 years old is to find why they're resilient to this Alzheimer, and how can we design a drug that will do the same. I want to make back a point to the COVID-19, because I told you about a drug called rapamycin, and it's known more as an mTOR inhibitor, and there are many mTOR inhibitors, and I know that what I'm saying is not really important. I just wanted to throw it. But there's a biotech company that is looking at mTOR inhibitor, and they were doing 2 phase 2 trials. So it's already safe. Now they are going to show it's ineffective. And they did one phase 2A trial, and I won't read you that, but the Second trial was a trial on 652 people who were high-risk elderly, which means they had multiple disease and pulmonary diseases including. And what's important in this phase 2 trial, that they had over 50% reduction in percentage of subject with severe respiratory infections, okay? And not only that, they were 5 days less than the others. Now, this is about the flu, but we're talking about not the virus, we're talking about the hosts. Okay, this is the problem with the COVID-19. The virus is the virus, but why the elderly are more, it's not because they have more genetic reasons for that. It's because the host is not as strong. There's an immune deficiency, there's inflammation, and the rest of the body is not good. And it looks like one of those drugs that are really targeting aging very well is a drug that if you just look at infection, and at that time it was viral infection, imagine that it also decreases by over 50% the severity of disease. Those are in people who are 75 years old. This will be a major way to decrease the burden of the flu. By the way, mTOR inhibitors are in studies in dogs and in monkeys, and they've showed to decrease, to be impactful in Alzheimer models as well. And there's been lots of shouts to try and do more trials about them. I'll tell you more about it. So what I'm telling you is we have kind of a pipeline, we have the hallmarks, we have $500 million of biotechs that are producing those drugs. So where is it? Why are we stuck? Well, we're stuck because biological discoveries, okay, usually lead to biotechs and pharmaceuticals to develop the drug, and that's how we got drug. The problem is that aging is not something that the FDA knows as to be a preventable situation. So if diseases of aging are not recognized as preventable, okay, the healthcare provider doesn't have to pay for you. You can come and say, it's not only going to prevent my Alzheimer, but my heart attack too. And the healthcare provider said, well, too bad, it's expensive, okay? If that's the case, the pharmaceuticals are not going to jump in to develop more drugs, better drugs, because they need a business plan. So what we need to do now is to really work and get an indication for this idea that aging is preventable. And what we chose, and when I say we chose, I'm leading a bunch of scientists. We have no pharmaceuticals involved. And we want to repurpose a drug that's called metformin. And metformin, why we chose metformin? Because when we give it to animals, it delays their aging and they live longer and healthier. When we give it to people, it will prevent diabetes in a clinical trial. In a clinical trial, if we give metformin or other forms of treatment for diabetes, it will prevent heart disease. It's associated with less cancer. Almost every cancer is decreased by 30% in people who are on metformin. It delays cognitive decline in Alzheimer's. So there are 2 studies, not in diabetic patients, but in MCI patients who got metformin for anywhere between 6 and 9 months. And some of the endpoints have shown that MCI didn't deteriorate in the people on metformin, some positive results, not in on domain, but some of the domains. And most of the data with Alzheimer is also positive in a sense that the people on metformin got less Alzheimer's. And then there's also lower mortality. In fact, people on metformin with diabetes have 19% less mortality. In a huge study, 180,000 people in this study, they had significantly less mortality than people without diabetes. Okay, so people with diabetes, so they have diabetes, they're more obese, they're more sick to begin with, but they had 19% less mortality, and it was significant. So look at this list. This is aging, okay? For us, this is aging. It doesn't matter where you get metformin. Usually drugs prevent, statins will prevent heart attacks, right? You don't see drugs that prevent everything about aging. So we are using metformin really as a tool to show that aging can be targeted. And we've discussed with the FDA and basically obtain a new indication that will prevent age-related diseases. So those are the provocations I'm making now. And I think I made them in plenty of time for you to come and ask details or more about everything that you heard. But I will call for action and say the following. Everybody knows that exercise and nutrition are important, and they're in particular important when you're sequestered. And if you can keep your body exercise and not gain weight, your COVID-19, even if you'll get it, is not going to be as bad as you think. By the way, except one day, I was exercising throughout, and I'm on metformin for years because I'm pre-diabetic, a different story. I'm happy to be on metformin, but maybe that's why it was mild. Watch those gerotherapeutics, metformin, those rapalogs, there's other NAD plus supplements and senolytic drugs. I just gave you just a little bit insight of that. Watch them. They need to be repurposed and target aging. Tell everyone that this is the time. We don't get the front seat because everybody's fighting the virus. But we're saying, defend the host. Defend the host. Because if the host can get better as far as aging, it'll be better with less severe disease, less mortality, and shortest time in the hospital. And also, we want to make sure that politicians, and they're the last one, and they're the slowest, to understand, clearly we want people to be healthier for longer, but there's longevity dividends at the end of the road. And I want to make one point about the future because those things are significant. If metformin delays age-related disease by 2-3 years, it's more than if you even cure heart disease today. It's huge. But I want to make sure that you understand the future is even better than that. You can take a sperm of a 90-year-old man and an egg of a 50-year-old woman, and we can measure the age of the sperm and the egg, and you can fertilize it, okay? And you'll have a new baby, and that's the picture of the blastocyte or the new baby. And what happens, the new baby doesn't remember the age of the parents. They erase the memory of aging in their DNA, and they start at 0. Okay, we found a way in this instant to totally erase aging. So we have to figure out how to do it next. And then health span and lifespan will become a different kind of conversation. So blastocyst erase aging, let me stop sharing and go back to you guys, and I'll be happy to get questions around those provocations that I made.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barzilai. That was really brilliant. I have to say that I first heard you speak 2 or 3 years ago, and you've grown wiser and more exciting in your research as you've aged. You've only aged slightly, but your wisdom has expanded greatly. Thank you so much.
Yes.
I want to now introduce Dr. Dan Pearlman, because we'd like to take the privilege of myself and Dr. Dan Pearlman asking you a few questions, and then we will open it to the rest of the attendees. So I just want to introduce Dr. Pearlman for a moment. He is an esteemed member of the Aspen Brain Institute Board of Directors. He is a retired infectious disease specialist, had been that for 40 years in Denver. He has an MD, a master's in public health, and a master's in business administration. So Dan, you and I were each going to ask a couple of questions. Why don't you go first, Dan?
Okay.
Expert.
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to thank Dr. Barzilai for his outstanding seminar, especially in light of this is our first seminar in our expert series. And I'd like to thank Glenda for helping the board and the Aspen Brain Institute to figure out how to maneuver in this time of COVID, where we can't be together this summer for our usual events that we've had over the other years. So the first question is, in reference to all these genes that are for longevity, is there a way that individuals can get tested? And is there a possibility that we could manipulate them like with CRISPR or something like that so that we can utilize that information?
So I don't know if somebody else was calling you to answer this question. Glenda, was it you? So I want to make, this is an important question, an important point. And there are two parts for it. First of all, the genetic discoveries are with variability in how predictive they are, okay? You can have lots of genetic things that are related to the bad cholesterol, but they're not going to be as good predictive as if you have this cholesterol or not, okay? So the genetics usually is not that predictive. Sometimes it's very predictive, but sometimes it's not very predictive. And since I'm doing research here, okay, this is all within research. I know that there are commercial companies that are doing, you know, like 23andMe had some of the genotypes that I had for longevity. But it's important, I think, even more to know that the reason to find those genetic pathways is because we can target them with drug. We don't have to be very dramatic. We don't have to change all the genes. So I'll give you two examples. Actually, let me give you one example because it's relevant to cognitive function. We discovered that a change in the DNA in a gene that's called CETP that is involved in cholesterol is associated with longevity. Centenarians have 3 times the rate of those changes, those mutations, let's call them, not the right definition, but let's call them mutations for this discussion. Then it means that they had an advantage of having them. Now, we know that cholesterol is relevant to heart disease, but it happened that even more than heart disease, those were protective against the brain. In an independent study, people show that cognitive decline in Alzheimer was prevented by 70% in people with this mutation. This is not that we did in our study, but somebody else showed it. So what happened? What happened is that Merck developed a drug, and it was in phase 3 trial, and I don't know when they're launching it out, that imitates exactly what happens to our centenarians. By the way, Merck is not interested in aging. They're interested in heart disease, okay? But they came to me and I showed them the data and said, well, you know, if those centenarians have this mutation, it means that it's very safe to have the mutation, or it's very safe to have this drug, because we see that people that basically had the mutation, it was like they were on this drug for all their lives, they're getting to 100. This is really good news for us. And that's why they developed the drug. Also to tell you that the Khan family that I showed you before, all 4 of them they're homozygous for the CETP mutations. And they had perfect cognitive function until the last day of their lives.
Okay, do you want to ask a question now, Glenda, and we'll go back and forth a bit?
I'll ask a question. I think you've actually answered this, but Dr. Barzilai, I understand you're trying to move the field of aging research to translation. Can you elaborate on that? I'm not sure everybody knows what translation is and exactly, except the things you mentioned, what you are doing in that regard.
Well, again, so let me go to several examples. I think that's a good, I think the worst that we can do, scientists, is say something that nobody understands, right? And for me, translation is really, that's my life. So it's really important. So I think I gave you one really clear example on the caloric restriction. We do caloric restriction in animals. Is it relevant to humans? Well, we had to figure out that it could be relevant to human if we understand there's the fasting part, right? Because if it's less 3 times a day, it wouldn't work. By the way, it would work for weight loss, but it wouldn't work for aging. For aging, you need the fasting, you need the ketones. We're checking exactly what we need. So now we're translating the finding in rodents to humans. So in my labs now, we're taking volunteers and they're fasting for periods of time, and we're trying to understand what is the biology that happens in this time course, and then we're going to get them on a certain diet and see what happens to their aging. We check their autophagy that I mentioned, we measure their ketones and things. So this is how you translate knowledge from basic science to treatment. The same with humans now. When you go to centenarians, it's already on the translational. So first of all, we wanted to ask, are what we're finding in animals, are they relevant in humans? And second, well, even if they're not relevant in humans, even we're finding something new. By the way, CTP doesn't exist in rodents, okay? So it's only a human stuff. But if we have some discovery in humans, we have the genetic discovery, can we turn it into drug? Okay, that's a translation. So Merck has done it. We have another gene where Ionist has done it. So this is kind of what we mean by translation. For me, the translation, by the way, translation is a whole hour of lecture. If it's the short course, because there are several kinds of translation that goes from what we do on cells to animals to humans to clinical, okay? But I'm just giving you example. At the end, what's so fun about aging, we know we can target it, and we know we can target it now by repurposing drugs.
So, well, just a quick follow-up. Oh, I've got so many questions. Let me go, Dan, you go ahead, and then I'm gonna go to after you, Dan, I'm gonna go to the audience question because I've got 7, 8 questions in front of me that are very good. Dan, you wanna get one more?
Okay, so metformin is already a drug that's out there that people are taking regularly, and so is rapamycin. We know the side effects. We know that they're not that expensive. Niagen is a vitamin that's out there that people can buy. What do you think the time frame is where we're going to be able to have a person go to a doctor's office and say, we'd like to prevent aging in you. You've had, you've gotten to age 65. I think you should take these 3 drugs or these 4 drugs. How far off is that where it becomes personalized medicine?
So I want to start by saying it's very frustrating to me at this time, okay? Because at this time, either we suggest to do it, okay? If you suggest testing, then when is it going to end? In 5 years? With what? The frustration for me is we as scientists, and I'm as an MD, I cannot say that the study has been done and therefore it should be given. On the other hand, we're standing at New York in front of maybe the second wave of COVID.
Yes.
And I know that metformin, for example, the safety record, metformin was used by billion years users already. There are currently now 100 million people who are using metformin chronically. We
Right.
know everything. So it's not going to kill anyone, okay? It's going to be safe. So the question is, what's the benefit, okay? Why wouldn't we say, you know, if you're in a group of risk, why don't you start metformin? Because it's not going to kill you. It might only protect. And I cannot say it as an MD, but if I'm not saying it as an MD, I'm not going to have the front seat. So I'm trying to find a way for somebody else to say it. The one thing we don't want at this time is I don't want to say metformin, and the next thing, Trump is making an advertisement for that, okay? Because this will be terrible for the field and for the science and personally for me, okay? We want to find a way to do it where there's a lot of support behind us, knowing that those are difficult times and maybe we cannot do it the way we're planning to do. What we're planning to do is do the TAME study. And the TAME study is going to take a cluster of diseases. So what is it going to take? Whatever is in heart disease, whatever is in cancer, whatever is in cognition and mortality. And we're going to show that we're going to move it away. And the cool thing about it is that we're agnostic to the diseases, okay? Because we don't know what's the next disease you're going to take. Whatever it is, we'll delay it. So it's the cluster that we're going to watch, and that's what we call aging. We're going to push your aging. So any disease that you're getting, it's going to be later, whether it's mortality or one of those specific diseases.
Dr. Barzilai, I have a question here. You mentioned a very huge number of trillion-dollar longevity dividend. One of the questions is the government interested in this? Do they understand the value of this, the existence of it, and is anything being done by our government? Because this would be a real game changer.
No, you know, we went to the Senate, we went to the Congress, we showed people our result. They were very nice to us, but it really never hit a prime time. We tried to do it all over the world. So I met in Israel the economical advisor for the prime minister, Bibi. In fact, when I was there, Bibi called him and I had to wait and things like that. And this is where it kind of was crazy. I came to talk about the longevity dividend, and I have those papers and everything. And the economical advisor, who was a professor at the university, very smart guy, he said, just a minute. I want you to tell me that this is good for the individual. If it's good for individual, let me worry about the economy, which is really not what I wanted to do. I wanted to convince, first of all, the economy, and he kind of took the rug out of me all the time. But in the United States, it's all published. We make it in medical journals, and somehow the longevity dividend concept hasn't come through to the politicians. And you know, they're politicians, they have their own priority, but somehow it's crazy, but it's not out there.
Let's see, I have a question here. Is Niagen a good drug to help the aging process? Niagen.
So, you know, one of the burdens that we have, and that's why TAME is so important, is we have to do a study that the FDA will be convinced that a clinical study means you take people, enough people, you give them half the drug, half the placebo, and you really see what happens. And this is the way things are accepted, okay? Now, everything else out there, there are associations, okay? There are associations. There are studies maybe in animals. There are small studies in humans, but none of them is something that we say, oh, definitely, you'd live healthier and longer, okay? So I'm not in the business of, I'm not saying, you know, first of all, a lot of the drugs out there are good for the economy, okay? Take them. They make no harm. They might be helpful, take them. But if you're asking me seriously, as a scientist and an MD, I cannot tell you that this has been shown to be good for what you want it for. So that's my answer.
Okay, I have another question here from the audience. Some people, just a moment, I just lost it. It's about the connection of telomeres. Some people are taking medicines directly that impact telomeres, but it has some increase on cancer. The point is, do any of the drugs that you're familiar with and working on, the supplements or elements, do they relate to telomeres? And maybe you can explain to the audience, rest of the audience, what telomeres are, which generally has to do something about aging.
Okay, so telomeres are a DNA ending at the end of chromosomes. And what happens with aging, as cell divides, the telomeres are getting shorter. That's not the only way where telomeres are getting shorter, but, you know, basically, they get shorter. And because they're getting shorter, people said that must be some of the reason, or maybe the major cause of aging. And I'll tell you, it's not. It's maybe a cause for some of the things of aging, but it's not. So when Barbara Blackburn, who did Elizabeth Blackburn, I'm sorry, who got the Nobel Prize for her discoveries in telomeres, went into the population and asked, well, let's establish the association of the length of the telomere to health. And what happened, she found something really interesting. If you had very short telomeres, you're at risk of heart disease. But if you had the longer telomere, you're at risk of cancer. So what do you want? You want kind of the telomeres in the middle. In most animal models, if you increase the length of telomeres, and there's ways to do it, you also get cancer. So I wouldn't, you know, we have to distinguish between the biology and what the biology tells us and what companies are telling you. And I'm telling you that some of the drugs out there can cause you cancer, and we haven't tested them. They're nutraceutical, there are other things, we haven't tested them. You have to be careful. Without clinical studies, we're not going to know. And what worries me is those things that are dangerous. The things that are dangerous are the telomere lengthening. The things that are dangerous are growth hormone treatment that are used a lot of to anti-aging. This is the thing that worries me, because if somebody will discover that they cause problems, it will reflect bad on our scientific way to move forward, okay? So don't take it.
And just to end, you may have already said this, but what are the side effects of possible side effects of metformin and rapamycin?
So metformin has a problem with maybe 5% of the people on the first week. When you take metformin, if you take it in high dose and not with meal, it will cause lots of abdominal symptoms, including diarrhea. And they usually go away within a week. If diarrhea doesn't go within a week, which is maybe in 3% of the people, you shouldn't take the drug. After this first week, you have no idea that you're on a drug. The only hint that you'll have is most people within the first few weeks of metformin treatment are losing weight, and they're surprised because they didn't try to lose weight. And is it because because it decreases food intake? Is it because it increases energy expenditure? We're not sure. Or is it a combination? We're not sure. But people on metformin are kind of 5 to 7 pounds lighter than people without metformin, and you might discover it or not. But the weight loss is not why it's working. Okay, it's working because of the biology. Metformin hits all the hallmarks of aging that I showed you.
Fantastic. And
And
Rapamycin,
can I say something about the metformin also?
go ahead.
When you start dosing it, you titrate it upwards, and we don't really know what the best dose is for aging.
No, we don't. But one thing, what we are using for the TAME trial is 1,500 milligrams. And the reason is, the reason is that this is the average dose that was used in all the clinical trials. Okay. Now somebody said, but maybe for aging, we need more. And somebody said, maybe with aging, we need less. And we said, you know what? Let's go with the data, 1,500 milligrams. I have no idea what's better.
Right.
I see that it's about 5 o'clock in Aspen. Dr. Barzilai, I want to thank you for a superb presentation and taking all the time to answer our questions. We've all learned so much. And I want to thank the audience for some great questions and for getting educated and updated on the new science of aging research and its impact on brain health. Nir, your research is pushing us, Aspen Brain Institute, much farther ahead in our aspirational goal of creating a brain healthy planet. And I wish you luck in continuing to spread this word, and we'll spread the word as well.
Thank you, Glenda and Dan and Sarah and everyone. And I wish you good luck, and I'm happy to be part of your team.
Thank you again. And I want to remind everyone about our next session, which is a week from today. It will feature Ed Harold with his talk on breath as medicine for brain health next Monday, May 11th at 4 p.m. Mountain Time. You can register on the website. And our producer, Steve, do you have any more housekeeping notes for us? Hello, Steve. You're not, she's on mute.
Thank you, Dr. Barzilai. If you haven't already, please register on our website at www.aspenbraininstitute.org. And we appreciate your feedback. So please send all comments and questions to info@aspenbraininstitute.org, or you can contact us at area code 307-200-1070. Thank you all for attending, and I will close this out.
Steve?
Thank you.
Steve, can you still hear me? I just want to remind people about the recordings.
The recordings will be on the website sometime this week, so you'll be able to go back and listen to this, and we'll also do our best to answer every question, probably on social media or in a follow-up email.
Thank you all. Ciao. Best of luck, everybody. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you.
Sign off.